webinar has started.
Great, thanks, Shannon. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to join us for our inaugural Climate Action Forum meeting, excuse me. This is a regular meeting that will meet every other month. So today, April 9th, 2025 is our first meeting, and we will begin the meeting now. So want to just say, we're really excited to have this opportunity to work with the community. We know we have a lot of experts in our community in the way of electric, waste management, solar, all kinds of different industries that can help us as a city work on prioritizing our climate action plan and to really make some progress in earnest on it. So quickly, let's do a welcome and introductions and see who's in the room with us. My name is Sarah Margulies. I am on the City Council, and I'm serving as the Council Liaison to this Climate Action Forum group. I was elected to City Council in November. So I'm really excited to be able to participate in this. Climate was one of the items I campaigned on, and it's important to me, and I'm passionate about it. So I hope that we can make some progress together. We'll go over to you, David.
All right. So I'm David Muller, and as most people here, I think I live in Larkspur here. So I'm the lead for the Larkspur Climate Group, and have been very active, both in Larkspur and more generally countywide, and even some regional and state items, trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that are driving climate change. And the two big drivers are transportation and buildings. So I've been focused mostly on those, and I am just delighted that the Larkspur's Climate Action Forum has been established so that we can have this two-way exchange between the community, staff, elected officials, and have this sort of informal forum so we can talk about this stuff instead of the more formal forum of the council meetings.
Thanks, David.
I'll introduce myself last if we want to keep going around the room.
Sure.
Dwayne Price. I live up on Elm Avenue, starting my 49th year in Larkspur. I used to ride my bike into the city. I don't think I do that anymore. We turned off our gas line a couple of years ago.
Good.
So, and I'm hoping other people will do the same.
James Bill, I was an architect, so I retired last year, specializing in drawing buildings and all things electric and, climate friendly buildings that are really comfortable and compact, and I'm excited about the climate issue. So taking care of it and hopefully moving it forward, especially in the town. I live on Larkspur, in Larkspur on Pollard.
Great. Ms. James.
Mary Sue Murray. I moved to Larkspur in 1977. I'm a retired school administrator and a concerned citizen.
Thanks, Mary.
And I live on Pollard.
Great, thank you.
I'm Ray Baxter, lived in Larkspur 22 years. I'm also the GM VP for Bon Air, care about the climate. We do a lot of construction, both commercial and residential, and we care about how policies impact businesses and residential units.
And then we have a couple of folks joining us from Zoom. So it's completely optional. You can just stay viewers if you would like. But if anyone would like to raise their hand and introduce themselves, you're certainly welcome to. All right. Katie, I'm going to allow you to talk.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Can you hear us, Katie? Oh.
Yes, can you hear me? Uh-oh. Can you hear me okay?
I think we might be having some Zoom difficulties on this.
I'm going to keep talking.
Katie. I'm going to try to, it should be working all through the owl.
I'm going to keep talking until someone can hear me. So I'll just keep talking.
Well, Shannon is working to try to get the audio working for our Zoom participants. Jody do you want to introduce yourself? We have just introduced ourselves.
Jody Coker, I live in Drum Canyon, mostly here just finding what the plan is.
Thanks, Jody.
So I will continue to try to work on this as folks are talking. If anyone
Okay.
who's joining us via Zoom wants to participate, I believe the chat is open. I hope the chat is open. Feel free, I know it's not the same to go in via the chat to participate. And I'll work on trying to have this. It was working earlier this afternoon. Okay, here we go, Q&A. Okay, just Q&A is open. All right, I will work on this.
Okay.
A second, sorry.
All right, so thank you all for participating, and I'm just quick. The second item on our agenda is a council liaison oral report and comments. I am just really thrilled to have this opportunity to work as the liaison to engage with our community. Another one of the items that I ran on my campaign was civic engagement. So this is the essence of civic engagement. And I'm excited that we are able to have a climate action forum, which really does allow us to have open conversation and to engage, as I said earlier, residents, business owners, activists, anybody who's interested in this topic. And I believe that, our climate action plan is very important, not just to our community, but to the county. And for many reasons, we did pass a resolution in 2021, as you all know, or may not know, but and so there has been some work done to date, but I think there's a lot of work we have ahead of us, and it's great to be able to have an opportunity to work with the community to help us prioritize what the community believes is the most important, since this is our community together. We need your input and also your efforts to help galvanize your neighbors and bring more support, because they're really, at the end of the day, there's only so much that the city can do. We don't have a lot of buildings and infrastructure in the city. The majority of our buildings are residential and some commercial properties. And so it's about really galvanizing our neighbors and the other residents to get educated, interested, and involved, and see what we can do to get them moving too. So on to our staff report. Our staff update, I'm sorry, for Marin Climate and Energy Partnership. That would come from you, Shannon.
So first we'll address the staff technical difficulties that have happened. So I want to make sure that everyone who's called in can participate. The Q&A is open. That can be pretty arduous to type up everything if you want to participate. I'll throw it up on the screen when we get to discussion time. It'll be a little low tech, but if you call in, you can call in. Since we have 2 folks, it'll be manageable. To my work line, I'll put you on speaker and you'll be able to talk. I know it's going to be a little weird, but we'll just use my phone as speaker so the remote folks aren't locked out of the meeting. And then next time we'll get it right.
May I ask a question? You said there are 2. Katie Straub's one. Who's the other?
Jody Timms. Jody Timms.
Oh, Jody Timms. Yeah. Thank you.
You know Jody?
Yep.
So I'm going to put my my work number in the chat right now, and just put into the chat that you're interested in speaking, and then you can call it and we'll put it on speaker. It'll be a poor approximation, but it's what we have to keep things moving. So on to staff updates, particularly MCEP updates. So MCEP met last week, and like most regional agencies, we talked about the budget for MCEP and what's upcoming and what our goals will be for the next year as a group. One of the things that all of us identified is a real value of MCEP, particularly in the past couple of years, is that we now leverage communications as a group. So one of the things that Christina O'Rourke, who's the primary staff member assigned to MCE, comes up with is anything that affects the whole region. We have a common template to share on Instagram, in our newsletters, and on our other communication channels. A number of times a year, also, we translate things into Spanish. We don't have the resources or ability to do that for every single post at this time, but some of the larger items around the holidays, et cetera, there's a Spanish translation, which is also nice, so that each region is yes.
I just wanted to back you up for 1 second because I'm not sure that everybody knows what MCEP is. And so I think it's helpful to give some context
That's
for
true. Sorry.
MCEP, yes.
It's a government shortcoming that we go right into acronyms. So for folks who may not know, we have an engaged community. So some of you might know MCEP better than me. That is the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership. So that is a working group that's under JPA where a member of each city and the county of Marin, as well as TAM and other partner agencies, depending on the topic, meet together as a staff on sustainability and climate issues. The backbone of that group for the meeting is to primarily help us and both brainstorm, share information, go in together on initiatives when it makes sense on how to reach our climate goals established in our climate action plan. Marin works together as a region, much more so than other areas of the state. So although we each have our own priorities and we set our own policies, we share a central resource in Christina O'Rourke at the moment, who is trained in doing the research around how we identify what our climate action should be and to actually measure what our greenhouse gas emissions are. So there's a bunch of modeling that goes into that. And so one of the nice things about Marin that's not the same around the state is we all use the same model for what our greenhouse gas emissions look like. It's the same person working on it. So although models are an approximation, we are comparing apples to apples as closely as we can. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any additional questions on MCEP, but you'll see at council meetings and in this forum as we work together through time, Christina O'Rourke will be presenting on some of the initiatives that have come out of MCEP and regional efforts. So later on our agenda, we talk about the electrification roadmap. That was something that was a huge regional effort and a huge regional lift, but a lot of the work was done in MCEP and MCEP.
That's great. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank
And it's also important to note that Christina O'Rourke was the architect for our climate action plan and the climate action plans for the other jurisdictions in Marin County. So we all have, I believe, similar climate action plans. So if you are really engaged and interested, you can go and look where Mill Valley is, where Belvedere is, where Tiburon is, because we're all working off of very similar plans, if not identical plans. Okay.
So that's my only update for now. We'll keep going.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So you're done with MCEP?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I do want to add one thing and just to sort of help everyone get the flavor. MCEP is hugely important for climate action in Marin County because mostly it's these small jurisdictions that don't have the resources to on their own do a lot of stuff, right? Except real essential stuff for the community. And so MCEP provides a forum where all the communities can leverage their resources. And it's just hugely valuable. But one of the interesting things about MCEP is the meetings are not open to the public. They're not presentational meetings. They're for the staffs, for the representatives, elected representatives and staffs of the jurisdictions to get together and brainstorm around this stuff. So one of the real high values of this forum is to hear Shannon's report about what's going on at MCEP, because otherwise we just get little bits and pieces of it. And I do have one question there. I think at a recent council meeting, it was reported out that one of the items that was being discussed at MCEP is the 2025 building code cycle and getting prepared for that. And AB 306, which is a pending state bill that kind of affects building codes. Well, I'm sure we're going to get into that a little more. But I'm just curious if you have any more updates of how the folks at MCEP are looking at the potential impacts of this pending bill, AB 306, on implementation of the 2025 building code cycle. Do you have any update on that? I mean,
so the update at the last MCEP meeting, and then it's been discussed in other government folks, et cetera, is the bill's moving along. It would take effect pretty much immediately, right? But it's still in committee and working its way through the process. So it's being monitored by the League of California Cities. It's being monitored by the folks at MCEP. I do know that one of the developments is that the Builders Association has actually taken a stance against the bill.
Really?
Which is a big development. This is my
California
understanding.
Builders Association?
I believe so.
Wow.
I'll double check on that. And so part of that's a big group, and that's also the group that deals with the building code, et cetera. So that group speaking out and taking a position versus remaining silent. I can't speak for what happens in Sacramento, right? But there's likely to be a lot of movement on this bill. And again, I've heard this through other staff members. I was not at any of these meetings, et cetera. But one of the reasons for opposition is that it suspends the code in general. And for folks who don't know about this bill, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, the idea is to respond to the LA fires, Altadena, out on the coast, and to really not disincentivize the permitting process and allowing folks to rebuild. There were some concerns that the new building codes and the new requirements would really slow down folks being able to rebuild and neighborhoods being able to rebuild. The Builders Association, when it suspends that, it's not just maybe a concern for climate goals and electrification, other things, improved insulation, right, that can all help us achieve energy efficiency. But there's other health and safety standards that are happening on this and other material use, all of the nitty gritty stuff that I will not speak anymore about that the Builders Association.
That's interesting. Well, we'll get back to this, but hearing the update that you get through MCEP on that is really valuable.
Yeah, and I can actually, if we have time, I was just sharing with Sarah for folks who are really engaged. You can track the bill in real time online. We'll provide updates here, but for folks who really want to keep, I'll show you the best place to do that.
Great.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Shannon. Okay, so we're going to move on to city updates and presentations. And the first item, 4.1, is to discuss the creation of a climate action forum mission statement, excuse me. And I have prepared a draft, and Shannon has put it up on the screen for everybody to look at.
There's also some copies in the back for folks.
There are printed copies on the table as well. We want to iterate on this for about 10 minutes, get input from you all to ascertain whether or not this is going to meet muster, or if we need to add more action-based items. And we'd like to finalize this by our next Climate Action Forum meeting. If possible, we could finalize it tonight, but I know most people probably haven't had an opportunity to look at it, but we would like to open it up for discussion on this initial draft statement, mission statement for our Climate Action Forum. Anybody have any comments or suggestions? David?
In absence of seeing any other hands go up, I have two comments on this.
Okay.
I have been through many processes of trying to establish mission statements for various groups. And if you gave it to 10 people, they'd all come up with different stuff. So I mean, we could spend hours just debating that. So my sense is probably, I think for me, this pretty much captures the key stuff. I might write it a little bit differently, but I'm not gonna nitpick it. But there is one word I think missing in here. So I just want to point that out.
Okay.
Okay, so in the sentence, let's see. Well, it's the second to last line. Well, starting at the line, third to last line, when it starts, goals focused on achieving the implementation of the Climate Action Plan 2030.
Yes.
See that?
Yes.
I think the word right after 2030, the word goals or goal should be inserted there.
Goal to reduce GHG
Yeah,
emissions.
yeah.
Okay.
It's just a missing word.
Okay. All right, that's great.
So
Thank
that
you.
would be
We can
my-
add that goal. Anybody else have any comments, suggestions, ideas? Does anybody need context for what any of these terms mean? I think I did spell it out, Climate Action Plan for CAP. I stated the goal, the overall goal, which is to achieve a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions below the 1990 levels. And so the goal of this group is to help us, the city and council, prioritize how to take action on the climate action plan for 2030.
The other thing is this is a new forum, so anytime you establish a new committee, a new group, et cetera, we're in the here and now where we're like 3 months out from when this idea was in its, infancy of being created. So 5 years, we've achieved all our goals in 2030, and we keep working. What was the purpose of this forum? Why did we establish it and what were we working towards? Because this isn't the same as the Park and Recreation Committee, where it's in our code what the duties and authority of that committee is. This is a working group. So that's part of the idea, again, around the mission statement for anyone who's interested in it, or also to memorialize for the people of the future what this group was about.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Hey, just one or two other,
I guess I had a question, kind of, we're talking about a reduction of 40%, 1990 levels within the next 5 years.
Well, we've already made some progress. The good news is we
Okay.
have made some progress. So and we'll get to this a little bit later, but we have received some of the reports and data from 2023. So we're retroactive. We get our updates a year after, right? So we are in 2025,
Okay.
but at the end of 2025, we'll be receiving 2024
Okay.
data. We have recently received some 2023 data, so that will be something we'll be able to talk about at another meeting. I don't think we're talking about it tonight.
It'll be at a future meeting.
Yeah.
And again, we've made this in terms of,
Distribute that feedback.
sorry, what?
The feedback about 2023.
So we're gonna talk about it later in the meeting. So we talked about the climate action plan, and then one of the ways we track progress on the climate action plan is the GHG inventory. So we get our GHG inventories about a year and change behind because all the data has to be collected. Regional agencies submit, the air quality district submits, what are the emissions, where are people traveling to, et cetera. And then that's all compiled and we see, within reason what our GHG emissions are. And that's how, I'm sorry, I lost what exactly your question was.
Asking about seeing some of the report.
So we have, I was going to share, yeah. So we have a draft that's still under review where the data's been compiled for the 2023 GHG emissions. And it's our goal to bring it, once it's reviewed, et cetera, by staff, to bring it to the next climate action forum to discuss and present. Review.
could I just make one other comment on this? It's not so much a suggestion, but again, I want to, I come to all these meetings, so I'm pretty up on all this stuff and I realize not everybody is, so I'm trying to help link that a little bit. But back on this, there's 3 things in this mission statement that I think are really important, and there are all 3 of them in there. So that however they get arranged, as long as these 3 things. The first thing is about community engagement, and that's really what this group is about. Because the standard format of city council meetings is not a good forum for community engagement. Because absent it being an agenda item, you get 2 minutes to say something. The staff and the council can't even respond to what you say if it's not on the agenda. So there really isn't a place to have that engagement in the conversation. Okay, so that community engagement is a real key part of the mission statement. Second thing is about when it says to get progress updates, but also provide input. And that provide input, again, is a key thing. If it's a one-way thing, if it's just presentational from staff and the council, it's not going to help. So it needs to be about getting input from the community to help guide these programs. And then the third really key thing is to anchor it around the climate action plan. And there are other things out there, but that's sort of the anchor for everything that's trying to be done. And all 3 of those concepts are in there. So I just wanted to highlight those. I mean, there's a bunch of words in there, but those are kind of the big 3 that I think we can anchor around. And that goal on the greenhouse gas reduction was a goal that was set in 21. So, almost 4 years ago now. And so we've been chipping away on that. And one of the big transitions that needs to happen now is a lot of that progress was actions that Larkspur, the city, could take on its own actions. And it really needs to shift over for residents to take the actions now in their own lives. And so that's why the importance of the engagement and that two-way communication and everything, because it's really how people live their lives at this point is where the big changes can be made. So anyway, those three are in there, and that seems pretty key.
Thanks, David. Did we answer your question, Reed?
Yeah, I think so. I guess I was just curious, is the 2030 number something we can kick back when we move the goalpost, or do we think we've completed sufficient progress towards that this is realistic, or does it even matter?
I think it's, okay, so it always matters. So the less carbon we emit, the better. We can always get hotter. And the planet becomes less inhabitable. So this was set, I don't want to say a realistic expectation, but this was set with the fact that we live in a world where only so much progress can happen at the local level. So we've made good progress on this. What I do want for anyone who might be new to us or might be listening in, I don't want this to seem, when you look at these numbers in the GHG inventory, Marin, California, individual folks have a lot to be proud of. The climate science is still horrifying. Like, we are still on track to blow through 2 degrees Celsius of warming from pre-industrial levels. So although we're reaching these goals, and I do think I'm a reluctant optimist that we'll get to where we need to be, when you look at the global picture, including how we live our lives right now, like, it's not sustainable. So we shouldn't think that, like, oh, we're 40% below 1990, like, we're great, like, climate change, we're on a good track. It's still, there's still going to be a lot of impacts, a lot of mitigation, and a lot more work that needs to be done to phase out fossil fuels and other human activities that cause GHG emissions.
And on that note, the state has more stringent plans for 2045.
Yeah.
So we're progressing towards a goal for 2045, which is net zero.
That's great.
Yeah.
And the idea too with the climate action plans is there's new technology, right, that gets updated, et cetera. So you have new caps as time progresses that reflects new technology progress that's already been made.
Thanks. We do have a question.
Yeah.
And I wanted to
And we have
respect.
some new attendees. Maybe we can get them introduced.
Okay, how about that? Well, would you please introduce yourself? Let us know your name and where you live, and then we'd love to hear your question, because we did have a round of introductions before some of you all arrived. So I'll ask you, the other two who arrived late, to also introduce themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. Sorry,
That's okay.
Darlene Cullen, and I live in Green Bay, and I'm the founder and executive director of Cool the Earth. We're a nonprofit. We've been doing kids programs and adult programs about reducing carbon emissions for 17 years now. And we also run, it's called Ride and Drive Clean, about driving electric vehicles or e-bikes. So glad to be here. And after other people introduce, I have a question.
Okay.
What's the question?
You can, yeah, go ahead, Carly. Thank you for the introduction. We'll have the others introduce themselves. You go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. So I also had a question about the 40% and whether that's, aspirational or a target that's really firm. And I also wanted to ask about, why 40% when we're in this crisis. I think Fairfax has a goal of like 100%. And I know that that's an aspirational thing, but, for people to really, 40% is kind of a, I guess I'm just wondering if that's aspirational or actually a real target.
That is a real target. That is not aspirational. I would say 100% would be aspirational. And that is what the state is asking us to achieve. And so that is our goal, and why we've created this climate action forum, to bring people together to help us identify where we can make the biggest impact in the next 5 years, since we have made some progress, but we have more to make. And so that was the intent, and one of the reasons for creating this CAF, I'm going to call it, was so that we can take a closer look at the climate action plan, identify the areas that we really think we can take a big bite out of our greenhouse gas emissions, and then get to work together and implement those areas from the action plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
And- Folks are also welcome to sit up here if you joined us late. This is not like the pool kids table. You're welcome to sit through our pool, but you're welcome to join us here.
I'm a little late too, and the climate action plan is a city plan or a state plan?
It's a city plan, and it was an ordinance that council resolved to move forward with in 2021 to receive the climate action plan and to begin work on implementing it. And so we have done some work on it. It hasn't really been a priority, I would say, for our city and our city council. And so the city has done work. I don't want to downplay and say we haven't done anything, but we do need to, in earnest, start really doing more work and taking more actions on the plan.
Could I add something?
Sure.
So that is a great question. There may be others here who aren't very familiar with the climate action plan. So I would encourage you to go to Larkspur's website, and you can just enter in the search bar climate action plan. It'll pop right up. And what it does is it sets out some big goals like the 40%. And then it identifies maybe about 15 subject areas where action can be taken to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and then lists specific actions under each of those subject areas. And we're going to see a table here shortly that's going to get into that a little bit. And they're very specific actions, extremely specific actions. And so rather than just throwing out a goal like 40% and hoping for the best, it's like really specific actions. And so it forms kind of a roadmap, and we're going to be talking about a new county-wide roadmap as well. But for Larkspur, it's a list of actions. The other thing about the climate action plan that I think are really good, it starts off with a one-page summary called What You Can Do. And it's a good guidance for individual residents, what they can do, rather than reading through this whole plan and 140 actions or however many there. It's like what you can do. And this one page is a really good one. It also has a one pager that calls something like a vision of Larkspur in 2030. Like if we did all this stuff, what might look different in 2030 compared to 2021? So it's a document worth looking at. I wouldn't read every page, but read the first section because it kind of, lays out the big picture. Those 2 one-pagers are really good. And then you might flip through the actions just to get a sense of it.
And you can find that at cityoflarkspur.org/climate. So this is going to be the home for all of our CAF work. Everything we've done on the agenda, minutes will show up here afterwards, links to videos, any presentations. If we have guests who join us, I hope we have guests who join us and provide great material and presentations. If they're willing to have that shared on our website, this is where it all lives. So just /climate. And you'll see there's our agenda materials and there's the climate action plan. Which again is your good beach read on all of this. But a lot of this is meant to be the beginning of it really is the Reader's Digest version and the takeaway. And then we'll discuss more about our dashboard, et cetera, but it really gets into the more policy oriented work plan action items.
Thanks, Shannon. Okay, quickly, Andy, do you want to please introduce yourself?
I'm Andy Blauhill. I live down on the boardwalk. That's cool.
Well, maybe a little bit about the industry you're in.
Yeah, I put solar on affordable housing. I work with Sunrun. I bring that professional background as planning, housing, and renewable energy.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. And then we didn't get an introduction from you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Jillian Schultz. I live in Blue Rock. I am a biologist, plant ecologist, and I teach it. I am not carbon neutral in any way because I drive to the South Bay to teach. Long commute. But yeah, so David asked me to come and start being involved. So I'm trying, I teach environmental science and ecology and evolution. So
great. Thank you for participating. We're glad to have all of you here. Okay, I think we fell a little bit off track, but we're gonna continue on with 4.2. So we're gonna close out our mission statement item. We have only one amendment to it, and so we will probably move to have it approved at our next meeting. In the interim, if people have comments or suggestions, we can still accept them online. So please feel free to send along any other comments. All right, item 4.2, staff overview of the climate action plan work. So Shannon's gonna talk a little bit about the dashboard we've created. And it is a draft dashboard, but our hope is to iterate on this and get something that's a lot more digestible and easier to review quickly, sort of at a glance versus having a long document.
So the mission statement established what's the purpose of this group, but equally as important is to show that you all are donating your time to be here. Staff is providing work on this. How do we actually track what the forum accomplishes? And what the forum accomplishes to help the staff and help the city further its climate action goals. So if you look at the climate action plan, it has, as we discussed, all of the different elements and things we could implement to lower our GHG emissions. That lives in a document. And one of the things when people were saying, you know, what is the city doing? How could you do more, et cetera? What exactly are you doing in your climate action plan? We realized as staff, we had taken individual items and we had done things behind the scene that had helped our energy efficiency, that had helped lower greenhouse gas emissions, but we weren't tracking our climate action plan in any kind of real-time or centralized document. So one of the things that we really want to show is that we're adding value, that we're asking the community to provide all of these resources to us and that we're acting on it. So a Word document is not the best way to track things. We're a city, so we're not cool. So we're going to use Excel, but it works. And also, as David had mentioned, like it's a big, long document for folks to try to digest. We wanted to provide something that was a little bit more dynamic. So if you wanted to see different parts of the plan and play around with it, we'd have, I guess, essentially open source, but really it's just an Excel document you all can look at. To actually see like, okay, what is there under transportation and what does the city say is done? And if this is an area of expertise for me, or if I know someone in the community who might be able to help with this, you know, let's work on it. Also, it's a good way to hold staff accountable, not only to this climate action forum, but on the months that we're not meeting in the forum, we're reporting out to council on what we're working on to show that month to month has staff done something like adopt the electrification roadmap. Have we issued so many heat pump, permits? Have we tabled at a community event, et cetera, to where you can actually see what staff's doing behind the scene, because that's something that the community and the council has identified as a priority. So since everybody's here, it lives on cityoflarkspur.org/climate. It's also embedded within this agenda. And there's some printed out versions, but this is not something that's meant to be really living in a printed out version. It works best if you play around with it. So all of the elements of our climate action plan are available in Excel now where folks can see them. And we followed the format. We modified it slightly, but it very closely mirrors the climate action plan document in terms of what, at the time, the priorities that were identified, what the code is for it, what the strategy is, what department would take the lead on it. This would be for staff for the status description and the corrective actions we've taken. And then when possible, not all of them will be possible, especially if it's outreach, but if it can be identified for the GHG reduction as identified in our GHG inventory, this is not staff just saying, hey, we think like 1,000 tons just weren't in the atmosphere. This is something where if it can be quantified, we will try to quantify it. A lot of the work we do here, it might be hard to quantify, right? Like if we table at an event or if we talk to folks more, it doesn't mean that actions didn't happen. It just means that we don't want to misrepresent or come up with funny numbers about the work we've done. Yes.
Just a detailed question. The reduction, is that tons annually of CO2 or what?
Yeah, tons. I believe I will double check on that. But I believe it's in.
Yeah, I just want to second that question because it's really important. If you're taking all the carbon savings upfront, some actions, you know, like replacing a heat pump, you can take, you know, over multiple years, you can take that carbon reduction, and other things are kind of, you know, you have to repeat the action multiple times. So it'd be interesting to see.
At the next meeting, I will ask Christina Rourke, who does the modeling for this. I do not do modeling for GHG inventories, but because it's a topic for our next meeting, we can provide an answer to that question because she'll be able to provide an elegant explanation of that in a way that I'm not going to try to do on the fly, but for folks at the next meeting, we'll address that. That's good feedback. So are there any questions on this? Over time, this will become more of a working document, so I hope it will become a little bit more apparent to us.
It's, you're gonna be changing a lot right at the beginning, especially to get it shaped up, but once you kind of have it in shape, are you gonna also have sort of the archived versions of it so that we can,
So there will be an ugly, not user-friendly version where staff is going to timestamp on a PDF as of, and then it'll be monthly, right? What's taken. And this document in some months is going to look like there's a lot more progress than other months, right? Around certain cycles. So there, you know, we may take notes of like in progress meeting towards, you know, staff is researching or it's with legal, a new ordinance, right? And there's nothing happening. And then over time, there'll be more actions. And then over time, also my hope is some of these, once we've implemented it, there's a lag on the GHG inventory, right? Eventually it'll fill in the GHG, you know, that GHG column will also grow for what we can quantify, but there will be a lag from implementation to measurement.
And so, yeah, I'm just gonna add to that, the thought, you know, as Shannon and I are strategizing and talking about coming up with the agenda for this meeting and creating the dashboard in its infancy, you know, for me, it's a lot to look at. And so we discussed potentially really creating another tab on the spreadsheet that actually takes and sorts all the data, but sorts it in such a way that we're focused on two buckets that are identified in the climate action plan. There are 7 different sectors, or I think they call them industries, that are identified. The first is low carbon transportation, and the second is renewable energy and electrification. I think I have that right. And so that would bring us to be focused on about 40 items on this list of 140 items. So it's more digestible. It's easier for us to look at. And the biggest reason for it is that those are the 2 largest culprits in terms of the industries that produce the biggest greenhouse gas emissions output. So that's where we can get the most bang for our buck, so to speak. So this is what we want to engage you all on. You know, we don't want to just give direction. We want, you know, other people who are interested and have thoughts and ideas. Maybe we're thinking that maybe we're not thinking about this correctly. For example, you know, methane that's created from waste in our landfills has 28 times the amount of carbon emitted, but it's not as much as, you know, the built infrastructure or the amount of cars and vehicles that are traveling on the road. So, you know, I just had that thought today. Well, maybe we should be focused on waste. I'm interested to hear from our community, and we're all interested to, you know, make a plan together, because this climate action plan, as you see, has a lot of action items on it. And we're not going to make the best use of our time in this next year if we try to focus on everything. So in order to, you know, get some reasonable progress and make a dent in it, our thought is that we start with those 2 industries, the low carbon transportation, and the renewable energy and electrification categories, and work on some items within that. I think that reduces it to about 40 items. So we were going to actually suggest that as a prioritization plan at a very high level, and then go from there to dig in. Anybody have thoughts or ideas about that?
I had a thought.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm going to preface my remark, and again, it's trying to bring everyone up sort of a common knowledge level here. So in the original climate action plan, the one that was approved in 21, each activity, among other things, was identified with a near term, midterm, or long term. Okay, so that was a way of identifying among all these subject areas. There was also this near term, midterm, and long term. And that was based on how quickly could you get this item up and running? You know, if it was an item that you could just go out and tweak one thing and get it done, it was a near term item. If it was something that was going to take years to pull off, it might be a long term. But that was the only segregation other than by the subject area. Okay. And then what Sarah's talking about here is adding an additional segregation by priority, right? And I have to say personally, I really like the idea of doing an additional segregation by priority because some actions, whether they're short-term, midterm, or long-term, some have big impact and some have low impact. So it just makes sense that we should have an ability to look at the high impact items. The other segregation that you saw just a glimpse of up there is this color identification. And the way that is often used is an identification of what's on track and what's not on track. So stuff that's on track. I mean, those of you who may have worked in like a project management type setting, green is usually everything's on track. Yellow means there's some problem areas. Red means it's a problem. You know, it's not on track. And if you think about it, and I love this idea that this is on Excel, so you could slice and dice it different ways. Where everybody's attention should be is on the high priority items that are in trouble, that are not on track. I mean, that's where we should put our focus. If you have a high priority item and it's on track, nice to know about, but you know, we don't have to do a lot more. If it's a low priority item, we don't really care too much what's going on with it because it's low priority. And that near term, midterm, and long term is more just informational. You're not gonna base your prioritization based on when you can get it done. It's gonna be more impact. So I think we're really on to something here. And I've talked to Christina Rourke, the NCEP consultant who's been involved in all these caps. Has she developed any kind of dashboard tool to make it easy for jurisdictions to track progress on their climate action plans? And the answer is no. So we're kind of nudging, you know, out into an area here. And I really think it's something, and I'm glad to see you guys are looking at it as where it's going to be an iterative process to get this, you know, to a really powerful tool. But I don't think it needs to be a difficult or long-term process. I think we can do this pretty quickly. But anyway, I just wanted to explain to everyone, there's like about 140 action items in the climate action plan. So when you go to look at how are we doing on our cap, you know, it's like 15 pages. I mean, it's long. So we need something that's more like a single line item that you can quickly look, how are we doing on the high priority items? And that's where the red, amber, green comes in. You know, if you line up high priority and red, that's what we really ought to be focusing on because we got a problem there, right? So anyway, I just wanted to explain to everyone kind of, we're among all the jurisdictions, we're kind of on the cutting edge on this. No jurisdiction that I'm aware of has yet come up with a simple dashboard. And so what happens is staffs usually report out to the council, well, we're doing okay, or, you know, we have these challenges or something like this. But to have a fairly brief dashboard type report where you can quickly see what's on track, what's not, and how are we doing on the high priority items, I think it's a hugely valuable thing that this group could contribute.
We'll take questions. I do want to provide some context. If staff monitors climate issues and developments, if there's a magical grant that comes through that solves a climate issue that's not high priority, we will implement that. So I don't want folks to think that I'm not neglecting it. If by some miracle in this climate, something comes through to where we can reach our other climate goals that might be established as low priority or something we can't work on if conditions change. We just want to go around the room.
A brief question. How is the priority determined?
So, good question. So it's meant to be, again, it's meant to be dynamic, et cetera. It was identified by staff council and then Councilmember Margulies as our climate liaison. We went through this, and some of it was pre-existing from when the climate action plan, was in its infancy, but, things were identified, based on, I don't want to say bang for the buck is like kind of a crude term, but partially on bang for the buck and what it can be. So if you look through, I want to give an example, and again, not to say that other things aren't important, but in terms of priority for an action item for the city, it has on, one of the action items is to explore carbon offsets. I'm not saying that's not good, it's a evolving field, but again, in terms of bang for the buck or what we can do for a city, that's low priority at the moment. We're not going to really focus on becoming offset experts. We also don't do a lot of travel as a city. Because we don't do a lot of flying, et cetera. There's also on there, encourage a low meat diet for climate purposes. Again, I'm not saying that's not a worthy goal, but in terms of what the city can get in terms of community action versus maybe an electrification ordinance, it's identified as low priority. So that's what. When I keep going with questions around.
And I just want to back that up with, that is why we're here to get together today. What was established on this dashboard is just a start.
Yeah.
We as a community want to get input from our residents and business owners and citizens to help us identify, what do you believe is a priority on this list? Where do you think it's going to make the most impact? It's going to have the most benefit to our community. This is why we're in this climate action forum, is to get feedback and input from you, not for me to state like, here's what should be prioritized, because I don't have all of the knowledge. I don't have all of the understanding. We have members of the community who have a lot of knowledge on electrification, solar, waste management, and I would love for them to come and participate and help me say, well, we could do a lot with this one item, and here's how I think we could do it, and help give us suggestions and ideas on how to move forward with this climate action.
So I'm glad you mentioned grants, because I'm wondering also, so there are incentives for some of the building electrification and transportation electrification that for individuals, as well as there's a new program from the Air District called Charge, which is for multifamily properties. And so I'm wondering about, and there's other state incentives. So I'm just wondering about how that would be, that input would be taken as part of like this plan. How do we actually prioritize those? Because the programs right now that, people, property owners, multifamily could get significant funds to install EV charging for their residents. And the program grants open until June, I think. So just thinking about that, or there's also a new incentive for low income residents where they can get like $9,500 off a new electric vehicle. And that stacks with other incentives, new and used, et cetera. So just trying to think about how those MCE, I would prioritize those.
Hey, Carlene, that grant, or and not only grants from like a city standpoint, but also rebates, incentives and stuff like that. Since this is set up now as a spreadsheet, there's nothing to stop putting a column in. It's like funding, third-party funding potential. And we could literally identify those items that have that potential. So that would be a way. I got to tell you, this idea of having it as an Excel spreadsheet, and I did play around a little bit. Just the sound.
I knew you'd be in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I'm looking at this and I'm going, oh, I need to see these with all the high priorities stacked together and not spread throughout the whole spreadsheet. And so I just sorted them by color, and it took the whole spreadsheet, and so all the high priority that the way you guys did it, using red for high priority, were all together. And then I looked at the next one, and I did see some that I thought were in the medium priority or even the low that I thought should be in the high. To your point, Sarah. And so I'm wondering if you have any idea how we as a group can input on that. Like, are you thinking individuals who want to take a look at that could simply look at spreadsheet as it is now, and it uses the red, yellow, green, not as a status indicator, but as a high priority, middle priority, and low priority. That's how it's currently using red, yellow, green. So, I mean, should we do a raise of hand? Who wants to take a look at that and see? Do you have some thoughts on how we would actually get that input?
I have a thought, and it's, this has to be a living and breathing document. So perhaps we would have to create tabs. Mueller, I can say it wrong every time. Sorry, I get it right. Mueller tab, Blauvelt tab, and each person could create a tab, copy the entire data set from the first tab, which is all of the data, and then sort it based on their own criteria. I'm not really sure how because then we would have to come together and have a discussion about, the items that we all have in common. Those would naturally make the priority list. If we all felt that certain, items, LCTC1, I'm just using as an example, were all in our priority list, then, that would be one way to coalesce around how to
I
prioritize the
think
items.
also from a staff perspective, it's okay. There's lots of action items here, right? And so we track them, et cetera. One of the things, especially if someone said, I think this is really high priority in the city to work on it. I don't think I actually introduced myself. I think I came back. So I'm the assistant city manager for Larkspur. My name's Shannon Meyer. I think one of the things is immediately I can provide some context of, I will look into that and talk to the departments about where we're at if I don't know, or I can identify something where this would actually require budget or an ordinance or action by the city council. I'm going to work with Councilmember Margulies as a liaison to bring it, to discuss before the city council whether they would want to put it on an agenda. So I think just saying what you find in the climate action plan that you think should be a priority would be helpful for us to also just provide some instant feedback of okay, that's an inquiry that we can respond to. And then over time, depending on how things evolve, we can see these as action items and how we exactly move on them. Some of these, if people say are really high priority, you have a great idea where it's staff should consider tabling at this event because you're just not there, or reaching a certain group where you're just not there. Some of that might be able to just be done at a staff level, and I'm the assistant city manager, say, okay, we have bandwidth, we can do this, and we'll report out to council and we'll keep the community involved so we know what's up and we're transparent. There's other things where if it's a major change or it's a budget allocation or something, we can say it's been identified by the Climate Action Forum as an item that's of interest, let's talk about it and work through it and then work through the process. So I don't want folks to think that because you say it's high action, we all agree on it, it can necessarily change. I have to be the downer as staff, right? When there's allocation of resources, funds, et cetera.
Right.
That at least we're responsive though to say, hey, we heard this from the community and we responded to it. And then it's also very helpful for staff and for elected officials to know, hey, people are really fired up about this.
I like the idea of it being sort of an exception basis, because I think you guys did a good job of saying generally it's going to be transportation and buildings are going to be the big hitters.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there are some exceptions. Like I found a couple, one of them had to do with communications. I forget, I actually wrote down what it was called, but it was community engagement. And and most of the items under there are about communications out to the community, informing them, engaging them and so on. And that was in the medium. I would have put that in a high. And another one was the one that was in the low, for example, was about promoting available rebate programs such as Electrify Marin.
Yeah.
It's currently in low because it's not specifically transportation or building, but clearly that should be a high.
Be elevated.
So what if we approached it? People who were interested in taking a look at it, take the Excel spreadsheet, sort it by the colors, so you can see what's easily high, medium, low right now. And then on an exception basis, just provide feedback to the two of you. And then you can do your process, take a look at that. How does it fit in? And my guess is there aren't going to be that many items. There might be 10 that need to move or somebody might propose. And at the next meeting, we could just go through those. Okay, these 10 items came in for possible redesignation among high, medium, and low, and then just Then we just have to deal with those on an exception basis, maybe something like that.
Okay,
I want to keep just an eye on time because
Yeah.
we have a couple of additional items, so are there other?
One thing I'd add, there's also different stakeholder kind of subgroups for each of these things between government, commercial operators like myself and say residential folks. And we probably have very different priorities. And it might be good to know, who can do what here.
So that's a good note for another, I think we're gonna be having more tabs in our future.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that might be, because I don't wanna have the document be so hard
Yeah,
to do it, but I think that a version of this where we have especially higher priority items, or even some items, even though they're listed as low priority items, we are working on them. To say like stakeholders or, that's a good note.
yeah, that is good input. Go ahead, Carlene.
So I've seen a lot of these plans in a lot of the different jurisdictions that we're in and outside we're in. The big problem is especially trying to engage the community, which is what we're really talking about here, costs money and, real strategic planning, et cetera. And so I'm just wondering, has there been a discussion at the city council level about, allocating funds to do this sort of work?
So there has been discussion about adding a line item to the budget for climate action. We are going into very early budget discussions. I haven't even had a briefing on budget yet. So the answer is yes, but we haven't necessarily had funding allocated as of yet to the budget that is specific to climate.
Okay.
And that was that for climate or also for community groups? What exactly was the?
Well, it's for the support climate action plan.
But
Yeah,
by the way of community engagement.
By way of community engagement, or, I don't know the other items as well, but, what sort of funding is available to actually execute.
so something the city is currently doing that's through MCEP, which we all pay into that, or MCEP, we all pay into that budget, is there is funding for the Resilient Neighborhood Program that we all go in on, because again, we're a region, and although I want to focus on Larkspur and my job is for Larkspur, if you're doing like GHG emission reduction in San Rafael, like the climate doesn't care where the GHG are coming from, right? So even if it's an event that might be really, heavily participated in San Rafael or Nevada or something, depending on the situation, we go in as a region and, allocate some funds through MCEP. There have also been, these are very small amounts of money, so I don't want to make it seem like there's big spending, but Larkspur sponsored the virtual green home tour that happened that, we didn't do any work on it. That was all a community group and really heavy lifting by a number of stakeholders that were not us, and we contributed some funds to that. So there are small examples of that, but not a large example, and certainly not a line item or anywhere that's reflected in the budget specifically.
I think it's great that this is gonna be dynamic. Obviously it need to be because priorities are gonna change over time, and having some way to do it. I love the idea that we can download the dashboard and play with it at home and have all kinds of ideas and get all that to you. Back to sort out, without having to go through all the iterations in the meeting. I'm still just thinking about, there's a lot of different ways to screen these activities and the priorities. I'm also interested, one thing I'm interested in is just what we mean by greenhouse gas reductions. So I'll be interested, I know there's a future meeting where that'll be, there'll be some more detail on that. Because even that, there's sort of, there's primary, secondary, tertiary reductions. There's all kinds of ways to account for greenhouse gas emissions. And then I'm not sure what, I'm interested as we go along, learning more about, reductions. By whom are we counting actions of the city, actions of individuals who happen to be located in the city, just passing through the city, or things that are doing jointly, a little piece of the MCEP joint actions. So that's sort of the screen. On a very practical level, the funding available would probably be worth columns on the main spreadsheet as they'll guide us. And another screen is sort of what can the city do, right? It seems to me the city has three things that it can do, right? It can tell people, it can inform people, it can engage, it can educate, right? And so some of these actions, you can do this home aid or a branch for you here. That's an important thing. It has its own operations that it could green up. And that has actually pretty good metrics and standards, there's a certified green business and the city can look at those standards and sort of adopt those. That's pretty easy around operations. And then a really big impact the city can make is the city has a lot of power over the built environment. Somewhat over transportation, although a lot of that happens at a larger level, but things like parking that was in one of these things, what's parking change, that's a local decision. And buildings and housing and density and, there are a lot of things that happen at a very local level that have a very large impact. Reach codes for building and that sort of thing that the city does. So thinking about that's a whole other screen. What are the city powers? What can the city do? And I guess a final screen that occurs today, a way to think about this is sort of building momentum and sort of looking at it as a 5-year initial political campaign, right? This is the whole idea of, as embodied in the Paris Accords, the one we're part of. You set a goal, you try to reach that goal, then you reset the goal higher because the goals are not enough. And you try to reach that, and so that's another way to sort of look at it is, maybe there's things that are not a big area, not one of the main buckets, but it's an easy win, or it can be done by, all the third grades, and so get a bunch of people involved and build the momentum that we're going to need to keep this going for 5, 10, and 15 years. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to look at it. So having it as a dynamic document, let us play with it at home and get back to you and learning more about what these goals really mean and how we're counting things. Those are some of the types of things I'm very interested in as we go through these meetings.
There's a comment online from Katie about the dashboard and how she might be able to contribute to the dashboard. Katie, if you'd like to call in, you said you might, feel free to call in. I will share the screen right now and put the number up so you can see it. I'm feeling like a bad FM radio, AM radio call-in person right now, but this is the number if you want to call in. I'll be looking for the call. And then hello, this is the Climate Action Forum. Are you with us?
Hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate the technical adjustments for me. I promise I'll be in person with all of you in the next meeting. So hi, my name is Katie. Apologies, I won't be able to see you all reacting very well. But I just wanted to volunteer and say, I wanted to echo what you were saying earlier about the dashboard, particularly David, about this group being maybe ahead of other groups in moving into a dashboard format. And I'm new to this forum, but I just wanted to volunteer to say I have a program management background, and I'm very eager to volunteer my time and efforts to help, design this dashboard in a way that it makes it more collaborative, easier to use. But I would love, any support from you all on the city side around what's the best way for me to dig in and help with that. I know we talked about tabs, we talked about all sorts of different ways of slicing and dicing the data, but maybe for offline, just wanted to volunteer to help because I have some ideas around how this could be a lot easier to sort, a lot easier to view by priority, by stakeholder. Just wanted to offer that to the group.
Okay, great. So I'm happy to follow up with you one-on-one and we can discuss this offline. That's all right. We can bring it back to the group. Also to anybody, you're certainly welcome to call me or you can email me directly, or there's climate@cityoflarkspur.org if you have some thoughts or ideas. I appreciate all of the enthusiasm of this group. I am happy to field, because this needs to be working for staff. So although it could be better, in some ways it also needs to be workable for us mere mortals on Larkspur city staff. So I wanted to mirror the actual climate action plan, et cetera, not deviate too much for it. So again, over time, if there's new staff, new members of our community, et cetera, that spreadsheet still mirrors the document closely enough to where it becomes clear that they're linked. So I encourage everyone, don't do a ton of work. and do a ton of time, creating this like beautiful Excel document that may work great unless you want it for your own purposes. I think either talking with staff or sending some bullet points about what we might be able to do to improve it would be really helpful. And then staff can work through Liaison Margulies on how we might want to evolve the document, if that sounds good to the group. Because I certainly wouldn't want anyone to sink a bunch of time and then feel like their very useful thoughts or maybe even better thoughts, may not be appreciated or may have been for nil. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Makes perfect sense. I totally agree. It's only useful if key stakeholders can really listen. So definitely agree. And I'll be in touch to make sure that I don't deviate too far, but can make something helpful.
Would you mind in the Q&A dropping your email for me?
Happy to.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll hang up now. All right. So we are at 7:41. So unless there's any other discussion on this, I think we should keep moving so we can address some other things. And we'll come back to this. This was a lot to download. I appreciate everyone hanging with us for this portion of it. But the idea is at subsequent meetings of the Climate Action Forum that we post this stuff as it evolves. Okay.
So do you want to head off on 4.3 then, Shin?
I think, given the fact that it might be a pretty robust conversation, and I want to be mindful of everyone's 8:30 p.m. time, let's move on to the Countywide Electrification Roadmap presentation, as well as you identifying discussion about AB 306.
Okay.
Are we going to come back to 4.3 though?
I don't want to completely gloss over 4.3, but 4.3 and 4.4 for this meeting are pretty closely linked, and I just want to be mindful of time. We haven't stayed true to any of our minutes here.
Yeah, I know.
I appreciate the discussion and I think it's good, but I just want to, especially because this item is time sensitive and the forum doesn't meet until June, that we get to this discussion item and we'll return to it if we have time.
Okay. All right. So do you want to just quickly touch off on the electrification and then we'll segue into AB 306?
Yeah. So just for an overview for folks who weren't there, there's a countywide electrification roadmap that was developed over a series of years that involved multiple stakeholders, members of the community, builders, building officials on the city side, community groups, MCEP. There's a master document that is really meant to provide an overview and roadmap for the electrification portions of our climate action plan, because electrification is one of the things that cities can really work towards. We adopted it at the March 19th meeting. If anyone wants to view that presentation, I'm not going to try to recreate that again, but it really walks through nicely what exactly is in the roadmap and how we should use it. So the takeaways regionally, staff will use it to collaborate regionally for efforts both within MCP and through training with each agency. Internal use, staff use it for planning and coordination. There are the following action items that were developed as part of the plan. I have bolded the ones that there's a lot regionally here that we can work on together that'll happen over time. There are some that Larkspur staff plans to work on pretty much immediately and move forward. So there's a bill that's in the assembly right now, AB 306, that has been identified by the community and by Councilmember and Liaison Margulies as something that would be a good topic for the forum to discuss now and maybe provide some direction to staff.
So the bolded ones represent what? The ones that you're particularly going to focus on?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So the bolded ones, I got a little bit ahead of myself, but the bolded ones are, we adopted the electrification roadmap. I'm going to be meeting with our community development department, which includes the planning division and then the building division, about what we can move forward for Larkspur immediately. So there's going to be a regional, create a central hub for easy access to electrification information and resources. We can start that on our own city, to your point about rebates, grants, et cetera, that folks may be able to do in toolkits. Staff can start working on that immediately. Implement advanced green building and electrification codes is really what we're gonna speak to on this next item, or why we might want to. Implement permit streamlining and incentives, and then implement actions in partnership with community-based organizations. I also identified that for the group because you all are here and some of you represent our community-based organizations. So things may happen regionally, but certainly if anyone wants to join the cause or partner with the city in a way, if it's feasible and appropriate, we can work on that immediately. But with that, do you want to?
Yes. Okay, so I am going to bring up something that is specific to item B on the electrification roadmap, and it's Assembly Bill 306. Which I believe is sitting in the state Senate at this moment. You can all take a look at it online. If you go to, I thought it was going to be an easy, but it's California Legislative Information. I simply Googled AB 306 and was able to come up with the text for the bill. But what's important is that back in 2023, the council received a workshop and a resolution for an ordinance to update or adopt some REACH codes, green building codes that would address 3 specific areas. One was all electric REACH codes for brand new construction. So any new construction that was going up would have to be all electric. The second was for EV charging, which would increase the numbers of EV chargers in the city of Larkspur and take us to a level greater than is mandated by the state. And the third was some language for major remodels within Larkspur that if they reach a specific threshold, then they must meet energy score requirements through electrification. So at the time, Elise Simonian, who is our community development director, she was leading the charge on climate and she was on board with adopting these REACH codes. This all happened on April 24th, 2023. The city had hired a consultant who had drafted an ordinance for the city to adopt. But what also was happening at that time was there was a lawsuit that was brought to the Ninth Circuit Court in Berkeley about electrification. And I think it was specific, I'm not exactly sure, but specific to restaurateurs who wanted to use gas to cook. And so at the time, the city decided that that ruling had just come down. And so there would have been no way to force all electric REACH codes for brand new construction and specific to the commercial side of business or commercial side of construction. But at the time when the city was presented with this information, it was just after the court decision had come down on April 17th. And so they essentially paused action on this ordinance that had been drafted and was ready to go. Because they wanted to understand, what was going to be the impact of this decision of the Ninth Court in Berkeley and how that might affect. Well, as I suggested earlier in the meeting, climate hasn't been at the forefront of council, and so we're bringing it back. And we think we might have a brief window of opportunity here to update that ordinance or that resolution for the city to revive it and revise it and review it and potentially have it passed before June 1st, 2025. So this is, it would happen quite quickly. Of course, we need public comment. I'm not sure if the public comment that we received back in 2023 would suffice because we did get a number of public comments to the ordinance back then. But we believe that there may be a window of opportunity that if we pass it before June 1st, that based on the language for AB 306, which will take action effective June 1st, 2025. It does indicate that anything that between January 1st, 2025 and June 1st, 2025 would be acceptable or effective legislation. I'm gonna ask David to support me a little bit, because he's done a lot of research also on this bill, but in light of our goals for CAF, as we discussed earlier, to really focus on low carbon transportation and renewable energy and electrification, those two big buckets that we think will make the biggest dent, there are 2 action items with regards to EV charging and then, getting more electrification into buildings through remodels. So it would really support that objective, and it would be an opportunity to potentially revive this ordinance that was already presented to council at one point in time, remove the part that requires all electrification of brand new construction, and just keep the 2 components with regards to increasing the number of EV stations, as well as upping the commitments for people who are doing major remodels on their homes. So we would like to potentially have that as an item to report back to City Council from CAF as something that we should consider adopting before June 1st, which means it would have to happen in our May City Council meeting. So does anybody have questions, or is there some, okay, yeah. Go ahead, Reed.
So with this new ordinance that we would be discussing at the council level, would this be focused solely on residential units, or would this focus on commercial, like single family homes? Or would it focus on commercial as well?
It has exceptions. There are exceptions. So there's an ability to, as we're reviving and revising this, to potentially have it so that it is primarily focused on residential remodels. But I don't know exactly in the language if it carves out commercial.
Okay.
So we would have to look at that.
Yeah, I'd be supportive to support single family homes, but I think we'd have some serious heartburn that went after restaurants and commercial facilities that are
Right.
in a different light.
Well, we know from the Ninth Circuit Court decision that we can't go after restaurants.
Right?
Yeah, so just.
But other types of commercial facilities that have higher amperage requirements are also require significant gas for HVAC, cooling, grocery stores.
Yeah, of those 3 reach codes that were teed up back in 23 and then got paused, as Sarah was explaining, because of uncertainty about the impacts of the Ninth Circuit Court decision. So the one on all electric for new construction would have been all new construction, residential and commercial, but that one's gone. The Ninth Circuit Court decision said there's a federal law that preempts that, local jurisdictions can't do it. So the other 2, the one about an energy score for major remodels, definitely just residential, not commercial. The other one about enhanced EV charging infrastructure would apply both to residential and commercial. So, and what it did, I mean, what my recollection, I haven't gone back and read these in detail, but it's like if the state said for new development, if the state code said 10% of the parking spaces had to be EV ready, for example, the enhanced reach code said it had to be 20%. It just bumped the numbers up a little bit. And that's what it was.
And part of the reason for the staff pause on it, so there was the Ninth Circuit side on it, but also the rounds that came out of the statewide building codes, which is out of our, some of it's out of our control, and then we can choose to adopt reach codes, incorporated a lot of what was in there at the time. Correct. So it's best not to be bespoke when you have to answer to state law to be, consistent. This bill, should it pass, would put that on pause, right? So the city assume, I don't know my total building code history, but I don't know of a single one that's been suspended, at least in my working life. So we just assume that it would go through and then we'd have to comply with state law, which would make a lot of sense, but this seems like a different circumstance. And to be clear of what staff would do based on feedback here, so my building official and my community development director doesn't freak out as well as legal, is to bring this to them, have them review it, quickly, thoroughly say what's possible, what's not possible, especially if there was direction for us to go to council and to ask to fast track it. The way we bring an ordinance with options, et cetera, might look a little bit different than if we had gone through a long process where there was community feedback and things got filtered out. It might be something where between our staff, the city attorney's office, the timeline of saying, realistically, all you can get in better than nothing would be this, right? To put into your code. Because I also don't want to put anything into our code that we can't do or isn't enforceable. I do not like paper laws. No law is perfect, right? But especially if it's on us, I don't want to pass regulations that we're never going to enforce. That doesn't help anybody and just causes confusion. So I think that's part of the direction, is that staff would fast track this, really see where we're at, right? What would be achievable? And then in terms of what will be presented at a meeting, there might be like, okay, council, here is what it is. Do you want to consider this? Do you want to fast track this, et cetera? And when we say fast track, again, we don't have a lot of time. We have legal obligations as well as ethical obligations to make sure things are noticed before you change a code. I don't want for anyone who might want to be participatory in the process that the idea is to do something in the dead of night where nobody would know. It would just be that, you know, for other code amendments, especially significant ones, the outreach process and the review process would look a little bit different.
Yeah, hey, Reed, one thought is you could look back at, do you remember the date of that workshop, April 24?
I believe so, yeah.
April 24, 23. You could literally go to the Larkspur website and look at past meetings, look at April 24, 23, and you'll get to see the draft reach code. So you can see exactly what it says.
I'll go take a look at that.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean it would necessarily say the exact same thing now. I mean, maybe it would need to be updated.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, as a starting point, you could see what it said then.
And when you look at that meeting, the person who presented was a county staff member who had gone to a bunch of again, there were a lot of stakeholder meetings, a bunch of the different jurisdictions. We didn't all adopt the exact same thing, but we were, especially when it comes to things like building, et cetera, there are very few builders who operate in Larkspur. I don't know if one for our 13,000 person community. The idea was to provide something that would be understandable across the region. Again, we can set our own goals and we can have our own laws. I don't want to make it seem like we just have to go with the region, but it's very frustrating. One of the things you hear from the building community, right, is if there's just completely different regulations, counter to counter, the time you have to invest and what you lose for what might be something where, are they significant enough to have different, you know, GHG gains or different climate goals, or does it just look kind of different because this staff member thought that it should be this and this, you know, there was some real hope to streamline it across the region to make it workable, you know, for the folks who work in this industry, right? And trying to make a living and build. So.
You get another question.
Yes, Andy.
By the way, that's a great comment and that also goes to when we're looking at priorities, what can we do in conjunction with the rest of the county? For the issues that were involved, in these bills are maybe a little different from that. If you can or can't install new gas, that's really clear. That's not an interpretation thing. First, I have information that AB 306 is on the super fast track. Lobbyists I know and speak with who are in Sacramento say this one is on fire with wings. It's flying through. It's for 2 cycles. Only thing that might happen in opposition is they might slow it down and just pause for 1 cycle. But it seems almost certain that some form of this is going to pass from all the information I'm hearing.
Right.
The second thing is the Berkeley ban was very early and was very broad. It actually was White Chick Bagels that started and succeeded. Are you a White Chick?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan, for sure.
I'm a fan. But are you
No.
Okay. But they had, you know, their bagels were so good because they did the research and went all around New York and found the best bagels, and they all use the same machines, and those machines are gas, the ovens are very different. And so it was flying through, and they realized that it was, you know, wait a minute, kind of their process. So, and then they started looking at what it was going to cost them, and then it spread into the community, and then it was defeated soundly. And so I think trying to involve business is difficult, probably not a good idea. Not just single family, multifamily is very easy to do. To say going forward, we're not going to install gas. Previous to installing solar, developing solar on multifamily buildings, I developed multifamily buildings, and we chose in some of the things that I built here to not put in gas, because especially for building new, it's like just running the pipes, instead of copper, it's $3,000 a unit. So electricity's kind of better option now that you have good cooking and much better, hot water heating available, electric. Those appliances were not very good with electric 10 years ago, they're very good now. There's not a lot of good reasons to install gas in new buildings. And as I was saying earlier, what are the powers of the city? The places that it's really powerful is in the building codes. So I think that we'll be more ambitious and looking towards a ban, not tomorrow, but coming, that everyone sees is coming, and maybe trying to do it with the county. But I think us on Larkspur's roadmap, banning gas in new residential buildings would be easy and powerful step that we should definitely put off our own roadmap.
Yes, Jody?
I just add that, the big picture of commercial, avoiding the restrictions on commercial, I don't know about grocery stores, but I assume they need gas. And
Big time.
everybody wants a grocery store there. We don't have a grocery store that you can walk to now and get home with an ice cream that's not melted. You can, ride a bike maybe, but even that.
You eat it on the way home.
Everybody wants a grocery store here, and we're having a hard time making that happen. Nobody seems interested, and to put restrictions on it, that's just sort of the big picture of the whole town, keeping in mind that commercial restrictions probably not a great idea.
So just for clarity, there's nothing we're talking about here that puts a ban on use of gas. I mean, that was the whole Berkeley decision, is that jurisdictions cannot exclude use of fuels. So that's why
Even in residential?
even now in new, it's different. For new, it comes through a different thing, but local jurisdictions cannot say stuff has to be all electric. So
But that'll be probably.
it needs to be at the state level is where that comes from, and they have the authority to do that. So.
Did you have something else to add, Andy? Okay. Yeah, I need to do more research, but my understanding is that AB 306 will eliminate the ability for any local authority to change building codes in their jurisdiction unless it's for emergency public health and safety reasons. So in other words, we won't have an ability to pass an ordinance to do anything to our building codes for at least, Andy's suggesting the bill is addressing 2 cycles, building code cycles, which I believe happen every 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
So at least 1 cycle, but right now it looks like it's fast tracking for 2 cycles. So we're looking at 6 years that we will not be able to change any of our building codes. So that's why we're thinking if we revert to something that had already been looked at by council, and the person who is currently our community planning director was on board previously, as Shannon astutely reminds me, we have to talk to our attorney, we have to talk to our director of planning, and we have to make sure that they take a look at it and see what is possible. And then can we fast track it through the community too? I don't know if that's even possible. But it's
so you kind of posed the question, about this maybe could be something coming from this forum as
Right.
a recommendation for the council and staff to take a look at this.
right.
I would favor that. I don't know if anyone else would, but I think it sounds like a great idea. These things got paused not because there was any flaw in them, but they got caught up on what's the interpretation of the Ninth Circuit Court decision and how does that affect it? And it just got paused and never got revved up again.
Well, I also thought we'd have a building code cycle that would change a lot of state regulations that would, the next building code cycles are pretty aggressive.
Yep.
Especially the electrification.
Yep.
So they absorbed a lot of what was there. We assumed it would
Right.
pass.
Right.
So I think in this group, I can talk to our staff and talk to the city attorney tomorrow about where we are in the timeline, what's possible.
Okay.
And then see where we are. Also, it could be a recommendation of the forum through Councilmember Margulies to say if the city, I'd like to think we've moved the needle, but at least to make our voice heard. I don't think it'll change things. We can submit an opposition letter to this bill if the city council opts to. That's another possibility. So far, because it's being fast tracked, but it's also changing quickly. The League of California Cities, some other groups have held back on it to see how it evolves. Especially, we're talking about in Marin here, the climate action portion of that, and I agree. But the folks who are pushing this bill through, there are some real issues happening in LA, and it's a very compelling case of just what happened to those communities and how they were leveled. Knock on wood, they were fire prone, but never happens in Marin. Certainly in Napa and Sonoma, I live up in Santa Rosa, the aftermath of permitting and trying to rebuild and trying to get insurance to pay out what it actually costs to rebuild and to get the materials in time, et cetera. I don't want to downplay that in terms of the challenges that are there. So I don't want to be glib about this.
Right.
And people having homes is certainly a worthy goal and not displacing folks in communities. So I think it can be a recommendation of the forum that staff researches it and provides an update to council on the status.
Yep. And also maybe a legal review as well.
Part of the update, it wouldn't be a full, I don't want to speak for the city attorney's office in terms of a full legal review of exactly what would be in ordinance we, bring forward, but to give a quick look at it and then also respond to the timeline about what's possible now.
That's what I mean.
We can get quickly.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
When I say I have to talk to all these people, they're reachable. We're a small city. I don't want you to feel that they don't return my calls in weeks.
Carlene, do you have to leave?
No, I'm just.
Okay, because I don't think we passed around a sign-in sheet, or did we?
We did, but I think it.
Okay, did it get stuck somewhere? Did everybody have an opportunity to sign in?
Shaking your heads, I'm so.
Here's my phone, I don't know, I walked off. But
Thank you. Before anybody, I noticed some people leave, so I just want to make sure we capture who's here and emails.
And again, it's
so we can
optional. If you want to remain anonymous, that's fine. Be mysterious, but we love to hear from folks and then also update you on climate action items. So we're at
we're almost 10 past 8. And so we have agenda item number 5, community presentations and discussions. So in terms of this climate action forum, we want to invite members of the community to bring information on ideas, on industry, on legislation, on whatever they might know to be working in other communities and to present in the climate action forum. So in preparation for this, we created the climate action presentation form and a community presentation request form. And so it is also on the climate sustainability page on the website. You can access it there. And we're asking people to submit it a month in advance. So the way, just to remind people and review the process, we will be meeting every other month in person as the Climate Action Forum. And then the in-between months will be the opportunity for me to bring back to the council as the council liaison to this group, bring back to council and report what we're doing in the Climate Action Forum. If you have a presentation that you would like to present to the group, we've created this form and we are asking that you submit it to us 1 month in advance. Is that right, Shannon?
Yeah, we have the information. Yes, so I believe what we landed on was submitted the Wednesday 4 weeks prior to the upcoming forum in order to guarantee review so that we have a chance to look at it. Again, I don't want to discourage anyone to where if we have time or we can we can accommodate folks or meet, but depending on how packed the agenda is, I know that folks are both very tired and this meeting has flown by in terms of agenda items, just that we can give everything ample review. And then also, if there's a month that's really heavy on community presentations, et cetera, that staff can accommodate that, or maybe even look for, if there's a request form, you know, if we have something that's themed, where it makes sense for a couple of folks to present at the same meeting, that we can all review that and look at it. Also for my boring bureaucrat part of myself, I just also want to memorialize that if folks ask to be included, et cetera, that we have a form there and that we document that we're hearing folks out and there's a review process. So.
Any questions regarding this process?
And part of this is that we've modeled our climate action forum to the San Rafael quarterly meetings that are climate meetings, and there's a lot of community groups and activated citizens and residents who present at those meetings. So that's one of the things that we really wanted to incorporate.
All right. Sounds good.
So.
Great. All right, and the next item is what's on your mind? So, open climate conversation, wanting to understand, you know, this is a new process for all of us, and we've tried to hit off an agenda that we think makes sense for the Climate Action Forum. And we, you know, are open to hear what's on your mind, any suggestions you may have, you know, how is this all resonating with you guys, members of our community? Are there any specific climate action items that you want to bring up for us to potentially talk about at our next meeting? Yes.
Yeah, so on the EV transition side, it's basically been this lopsided transition in which people who live in single family homes and are more wealthy are adopting EVs, but people, especially in multifamily communities, really are being left behind. So I think that that's a really important aspect to talk about. There are new solutions, some of them very inexpensive solutions that landlords can take advantage of and get parking, charging it for park. So there's some new solutions which would be really great to get that information out to property owners. As well as the expansion of public charging stations. I think that we run across, you know, people all the time don't know where charging stations are, they don't know how to use them, and they don't know, for instance, something along the lines of that they now use Tesla superchargers with almost every vehicle and things like that that really kind of are shaping people's opinions. So that's just something so that that's how we roll this out in an equitable fashion.
So what I'm hearing from you is that you have a lot of knowledge on the EV transition, yes. And it would be wonderful to have you present at one of these Climate Action Forum meetings. I would also love to talk to you one-on-one just to understand. You mentioned a bunch of rebates for lower income families, a lot of good knowledge and information that we'd like to elevate and escalate on, say, our sustainability page, try to get that information to our residents. We have to drive them to the website first, of course, but if we can, I can also bring some of this up in council meetings. So I will definitely like to reach out to you, Carlene, to have more conversations about it, but would you, is that something you might be willing to present on also?
Yeah, sure.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Jody.
Well, I think you can probably tell from my comments and questions that I'm really not informed on a lot of this. And I think that is, obviously there's not tons of people here, but that's a big part of Larkspur's commitment and progress on this. And just even learning about the website and the pages that you mentioned, the 2 PDF pages that are there. I think, are those, can we get the manager's newsletter to encourage people to go there, and the what can I do page and things like that?
Yeah, so we've been promoting the Climate Action Forum in the city manager's newsletter, and then I briefly mentioned MCEP when there's regional messaging, we can have that all shows up in the city manager's newsletter. So there's lots about water rebates, et cetera. That is all pushed through there. I'm not saying that we can't do more. I hear that. But the city manager newsletter, for folks who don't know, goes out every other week. On off weeks or every week the council meets, we send a digest out to the same group about what council actions were there to help folks be informed. That list is around 5,000 folks, give or take. Most of them are Larkspur residents, but there's some staff members from other agencies. I'm sure there's some people who are interested, who are like in our business community, who subscribe to the newsletter. Our open rate is well above industry standard. So it hovers between 40 or 60%. Like a lot of folks, we really lose people on clicking through the links, which sometimes you don't need to. But to get that engagement all the way to the website, I can present or do a liaison. Councilmember Margulies actually discussed to provide an overview of our communications and how we're reaching people now and how we might be able to improve that.
That's great.
But it's always a challenge. I am proud of our newsletter open rate. We are much better than.
It's a good newsletter.
Great.
I wonder on that point, the idea, and I certainly, and I've talked to you about it, it does seem like the climate content of the newsletter has been increasing. I wonder if there might be like a regular feature there that's like climate corner or something like that, sort of like the library news is always in there, that there's a regular thing in there every time that it's a climate. It might be like, at one time might be, hey, check out Larkspur's new climate page on its website. And, the next time it's, hey, the first meeting of the Climate Action Forum occurred, we talked about this stuff. So like, there's like it's not an intermittent thing, but it's like a regular, it keeps popping up. You can't get away from it. Just a thought of that.
Staff's happy to incorporate that if that's a recommendation. At one point, we talked about having a standalone climate newsletter, but one of the things to also know about newsletter things is the more newsletters you send, the more people unsubscribe. Because people's email box is tortured to death. So I try again to be mindful, pushing things into folks' space. So we thought it was a better venue. To send it out to the main group. So we can.
That's pretty big, 5,000.
It's good.
We have a good list.
Do people subscribe to that, or is it?
Yeah.
It just goes. I mean, it comes to me, but I don't know why it comes to me. I read it, but
So, the city pulled, if you've ever come to any of our meetings, public comment and provided an email address to us. When we established the newsletter years ago, legal said this was okay. That I could opt you in and not be in violation of the CAN Spam Act. If we said, you've expressed interest in the city of Larkspur, you are on one of our lists, you can unsubscribe right here if you never want to hear from me again. And we do that actually yearly, where we kind of walk through the unsubscribe, and especially as folks get added. And that's how we built that list. So there are lots of folks who are like, oh, great newsletter, where'd it come from? And it's like, at some point, you talked to us. And it was all fair game, according to the city attorney's office. People were pretty appreciative of it. And if you don't want to hear from us,
but you can also subscribe to it.
Yes.
On the website. There is that option too. That's how I get it.
But if you signed up, we'll add you to the list when you provide an email that you're on to them. Okay, so we are at 8:18.
Yep.
So community discussion items not on the agenda. I think one of the things that Councilmember Margulies mentioned is to really say what the next steps are from staff perspective at the end of these forum meetings when it's appropriate. So I have on my list, the two main things is we're going to have feedback about how to, some feedback that folks are going to provide us, as well as some that was at this meeting, where we will go through and evolve the spreadsheet a little bit and do our first crack at evolving the spreadsheet. Thank you.
Thank you
for hanging.
Thanks, Carly.
I can add the climate corner. I can do that. That can happen. And then to really work with our other staff and work with legal about where this stands on AB 306 and what our options are at this point. And again, that requires some more research because I don't want to overpromise on that and what might happen on timeline, but we'll do our best. That'll happen tomorrow. So that's what I have on it. Is there anything else that
matches my list? I do have one other, I guess it's a what's on your mind item. It was going to come up on ongoing and upcoming issues and actions in Larkspur. And that is on the budget development.
Yes.
So this idea that came up, I think it was at the January 15th meeting, somehow having a climate element to the budget. And I have to say for me, I think the two sort of rules of thumb that I remember from my days in industry is one, if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't happen. And the other, if it doesn't get budgeted, it doesn't happen. And so the concept that I had been thinking about for that is not necessarily, because I remember that when I brought this up before in council meetings about, reflecting climate action in the budget, the answer was always, oh, well, most of that is staff time. And so it's included in the budget for the different departments as part of the covering for staff. And that makes total sense. But the concept that I'm wondering is, if not as one of the main elements of the budget, but as a separate, if the climate portion of those other items, the portion that is embedded in those other items could be extracted out and just looked at from a climate. So it's sort of like, I'm just totally making these numbers up, but if Larkspur could only identify $10,000 in its annual budget that's focused on climate, it's a different thing than if it has $100,000 focused. And whether it's 10 or 100, it may be buried in a lot of it in staff time, but at least to extract that out so that staff has a clear message that in actually spending the annual budget for this department, we're expected that at least $30,000 of that is going to be carrying out the actions in the climate action plan that are assigned to our department. So just conceptually, I think that's a way it could work. And it's almost more just to highlight that rather than to specifically track it or something like that. I mean, I think, I don't know what you guys are thinking, but I was very happy to hear that come up with, I think that was the January 15th meeting about reflecting, climate actions in the budget. So, just a thought.
Yeah, so there were actually a couple of different things that came up with that. So one thing that was distinct, some is capturing what we've done, right?
Right.
We've already implemented a couple of things at the staff level where now my time to climate items, and there's an analyst. So our awesome newsletter, it's not me, it's our analyst, Colby Gleason. He does all the heavy lifting on it. We are now putting in our timesheet. It's not exactly like billable hours, right? We're not billing for it, but we're capturing what is exactly climate. We're very honest about that.
Okay.
So not
Good.
anything, but we'll get a better idea of like, what is the investment here?
Right.
As well as, public works, if there's a CIP project where there's a pretty direct link, if it's, installing EV chargers at our sites, that's pretty clearly climate.
Yeah.
To identify that and capture that as climate. But there was a separate part of that conversation where there was interest in the council and community of, if there is room in the budget, or if we can identify some priorities, could we set aside money that then could get allocated to a climate project? And that's different than capturing what you're doing and
Right.
identifying.
Yeah,
So there are two separate parts of that.
No, I think.
So in terms of capturing it, staff is working on it. We've already put in some processes to where we can report out to the community. We also want to be honest and not overstate what things are. So we pay for the city manager newsletter, right, for our software, et cetera. I'm not going to count all of that as climate because we do other things that has another mission. So we want to make sure that we capture things honestly with the community. And in a way where there's the payoff, where we're not just tracking every cent. And then it's like, oh yeah, you just did like 15 hours on that, but I'd like you to work on an ordinance. So staff's working on that level, and the budget process is kicking off evidently.
Good, great to hear it.
Well, we're finishing up with 6 minutes to spare.
I have another thing on my mind.
Okay, what's on your mind, David?
This is a format thing.
You want to take the win, David, go home.
No. This is gonna be really brief. This is gonna be really brief. It's literally the format for this room. If we could be, either more of these tables, could we have had a bigger, this feels somewhat presentational over there. I don't know. Would you guys rather be sitting where you are or around a?
Kind of conference.
So it was more dialogue.
It's not.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I agree.
It's interesting.
Yeah, we have another table back there. We have less room and less tables than you might think, up here. So we could make this a full, but then,
Let's do
And if you have
it.
other
Just chairs
people-
kind of.
yeah,
we
the
could do
stadium
chairs.
style.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's good
They could
feedback.
get more people.
And
Yeah,
be
they're
able to
pretty
get
soon
on
we'll
the
be-
table.
Well, that's part of why I kept this
Yeah.
loose, because I had heard different numbers of folks who might come, so I didn't want to set something up where, again, like you were in the standing room only section, there's the general admission. there's the VIP.
I would expect this is pretty typical what you got tonight.
Yeah.
Be my guess.
Well, how many people left already? 3, 2. We had about 3 more people, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So we're doing 12 to 15
Yeah, I think we had
people.
12.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, Jody and Katie, thank you for joining us. I apologize. You both provided your information and I've captured it for email, so you're also on our list in the Q&A. And then should we adjourn the meeting?
Yes. I mean, I would say we're officially adjourning the meeting of April 9th, our first Climate Action Forum meeting from 6:30 to 8:30. And our next regular meeting will be held in this room on June 11th, 2025. So we hope to see you all at the meeting in June. And in the interim, please do visit our website and please provide updates as we discussed on the dashboard. Any insight or iteratives you can provide, that would be great. And any submissions for presentations would also be welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.